Hi everyone, we're getting ready to close off LRVS. Maybe we have saved the best for last. We are very excited today to introduce Genevieve Cheung. She's a principal consultant at Atticus Consulting. Hi.
Hi, Sanya. Thank you for having me here today.
Yeah, I'm excited because she is from Barbados, also from the Caribbean. So we're representing the Caribbean in this particular one. And she has a very, very interesting question for us. She asks, have we bred resentment for both men and women in our efforts to increase women in STEM? Now, that is very interesting. I want to hear what you have to say on this, Jen. So I'm going to pass the floor to you. The floor is all yours. And feel free to comment in the chats and let us know what you think as we go along with this.
Okay. Thank you, Sanya. So, as Sanya has introduced, my name is Genevieve. Very, very honored to be here at our LRVS among such qualified professionals. It's a little bit intimidating to be the last speaker, to be honest, but here we are. So, what qualifies me to give this presentation today? Well, I'm female. Hopefully, that part is obvious, but I'm also an engineer. Although, unlike most of my colleagues at this conference, I'm a civil engineer and I started my career in consulting engineering. Actually, I'm from Toronto, Canada, back home. So about 8 years ago, I took a bank because bank like engineers analytical skills, and that took me to a different part of the world in the Caribbean. I love the climate and the lifestyle. And long story short, I ended up leveraging my civil engineering background and getting into construction. So this is a video of me living in Barbados for the last 6 years. I worked as a project manager for the construction side of a hotel resort in Barbados. And while I was always working in a male-dominated environment, working in the construction industry, which generally have a different kind of labor force, and in the Caribbean culture there isn't as much female as representation in engineering, let alone in the construction field, and then amplify with my visible minority ethnic background. You can imagine I stuck out like a sore thumb. It did make me acutely aware of my place as a woman and as a minority in a male-dominated field. But over these years, I've proven myself and earned respect and climbed my way up in the organization. FYI, I no longer work at the hotel resort anymore, but I left on really good terms and I decided to start my own business. So that's a bit of a synopsis of my career trajectory and my qualifications that justify my being here today to talk about gender diversity in STEM fields and in the workplace. So I'm here to challenge today the conventional idea that there's a lack of female representation in STEM. It sounds like I'm shooting myself in the foot here and perhaps being regressive in all the gains women have made towards gender equality, but hear me out. For those who are not familiar, STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So since most of us here are in technical fields, let's start with some numbers. Let's see. So while I'm using US data, women have been earning more PhDs than men for the past decade. If, hold on, sorry, slight technical difficulty here. Let's hold on. If, there we go. Right. So if you see here, women are, I mean, this is a summary. So women are generally earning more doctoral degrees than men are. But the reason I'm choosing PhD as a benchmark here is because a key requirement for PhD is to make an original contribution of knowledge. So if we look at these figures in an article published by the World Economic Forum from 5 years ago now, you see that more women than ever are earning PhDs. Great news for women, right? If we read in a straightforward way, they show women are doing better than men in terms of acquiring PhDs. But and it crushes, the old-time sexist stereotypes that women are incapable of reason and that education is wasted on females. So now, if we were to take a closer look, you still see that men still dominated the fields of engineering. See here at 76.6%. Mathematics and computer sciences at 74.9%, and physical science, physical and earth science at 65.9%, which seems to suggest that more needs to be done to encourage women to study STEM subjects to a higher level. So at this point, you must be wondering, okay, so, what am I talking about? There's no real insight being offered here. So, firstly, even though the data shows that women have been doing better than men in attaining the highest level of education for more than a decade now, there's no real celebration on that particular narrative. Moreover, there's no discussion for the need to encourage more men to study health or social sciences at a higher level. No concern was expressed about the underrepresentation of men in any broad field of science as well. So, assuming a roughly 50-50 split of women and men in higher education, which is evident from the graduate figures, if a society wants to have more women in STEM, then more men need to be encouraged to go into fields that are female majority. So, secondly, the definition of STEM is not clear enough. If you look at when people speak of STEM, it seems they understand the STEM refers to hard sciences like, the physics, chemistries, but they're not talking about soft sciences like psychology or in neuroscience. The T in STEM seems to refer to only computers, cars, oil refineries, and aircraft, but not to X-ray machines and MRI scanners used in health sciences, carbon dating technology used in archaeology, and the amounts of data used, processed on computers used in linguistics and political sciences. So I'm not really getting into I don't have, I guess, particular bone to pick with the E and the M, the engineering and the mathematics, and I'll circle back to that later on. But let's look at the science and technology of STEM for now, right? If we adopt a more accurate definition of what science entails, the problem of female underrepresentation disappears. So this means including health sciences, social and behavioral sciences, and biological and agricultural sciences from STEM, on the grounds that these broad fields contain sciences as their names clearly indicated. Moreover, these fields develop and use a lot of technology, like how How's a dentist drill not technology? How's an X-ray machine used in radiography or heart and breathing monitors used by nurses in ICUs not technology? What about like a whiff of oxytocin used in psychology experiments not technology? How is examining and modifying DNAs in biology and agricultural science not technology? So that's what I'm challenging here. When STEM is accurately defined using broader and more realistic definitions of science and technology, using the same data shown earlier in my last slide, it turns out that women earn about 50% of the STEM PhDs, which is summarized here. You'll see that the male majority of in the hard sciences are balanced by female majorities in health sciences and the soft social and behavioral sciences. So if parity of women in STEM is the goal, then as shown in the data, this mission is accomplished. That's not to suggest that everything is great in the world of women. Things remain pretty bleak in many non-Western countries, and challenges regarding female promotions to senior levels remain, even with in the Western countries. So, but what I'm suggesting here is, I guess as the positive psychologists do, is that a win is a win. The US statistics, at least in the case of highest form of education like PhD, they're a major win for women in the 21st century. So you see in the last little column section here I just clicked on that I've added an extra classification, right? I've made a broad judgment that engineering, physical and earth sciences, mathematics, and computer sciences are, I guess the narrower definition of STEM is focused mostly on things. I guess with the cogwheels here. Whereas for health sciences, social and behavioral sciences, the sciences that are often overlooked when talking about STEM are more focused on people. Biological and agricultural science, which I judge to be more about animals and plants than peoples and things, are about, they're sort of like the halfway house between the inanimate objects and the inanimate things that are mostly studied in the hard sciences and the people that are studied in the health sciences that are the so-called soft, social, and behavioral sciences. So as the data shows, this halfway house, if you look at biological and agricultural sciences, it would seem to confirm that male and female have roughly equal interests in animals and plants, I guess, or in general, fauna and flora. Males as a group are less into people and more into things, from what we gather in these statistics, right? So females as a group tend to be more interested in people and less interested in things. I don't think that's a particular revelation. Psychologists have known about this asymmetry between the sexes for decades. Now, that's not to say women are incapable of studying things, or that women cannot code or, that kind of technical skills, nor is it to say a particular men or women cannot be interested in both people and things. Nor is it even claiming that engineering is entirely about things and not people. It's not. The people and things preference exists on a spectrum. It's not, like a either or kind of binary. What these figures are showing is just that bright women as a group, because we're looking at PhD stats here, tend to be somewhat more interested in the so-called soft sciences and somewhat less interest in the so-called hard sciences. And this distinction is, it's pretty dated. There's no great problem here. It's just kind of confirming, like well-known psychological findings about people and things. So this ties back to my first point about not encouraging increasing representation of men in female-dominated fields. If we assume that there is an overall parity between the numbers of men and women, and that roughly the same numbers are available to enter any broad field of PhD study, mathematically speaking, and I guess sort of intended. Uh, you cannot have majorities of women in some sectors, such as health sciences and education, without minorities of women in other sectors, such as engineering and computer sciences. And this effectively is, a seesaw principle. To make this more visual, if we were to imagine 100 kids in a park, we have 53 girls and 47 boys based on, the numbers that were shown. And we have 11 seesaws, the 11 subjects in it. And the girls stampede, they run towards the 4 seesaws they think are more preferable for whatever reason. Maybe it's the color or the smell or whatever it is. And there's 4 seesaws have roughly equal number of boys and girls on them. We shouldn't be exactly troubled when we come across 3 seesaws with very little girls on them, because we simply have run out of girls to put on these seesaws. The majority freely chooses to play on the other 8 seesaws based on their preferences and interests. So we shouldn't be arguing that there's something, I suppose, malevolent about, like a 3 seesaws, or I guess 3 fields where there's mostly boys compared to, 4 other sciences where it's mostly girls. And if we have data that shows asymmetries and preferences for certain kind of, preferences, and we do. So if we extend these kind of the same analogy to academia, we see that seesaw involving people are more attractive to females. Those involving things are more attractive to males. Some of them are equally attractive to both males and females, such as, the agricultural sciences and the biological science, the businesses and the arts and humanities. So based on what I described so far, we can conclude that, based on what I described so far, slight glitches here. We can conclude that sexism is not particularly convincing explanation for the lack of women in the narrow definition of STEM at universities. I want to stress that I don't doubt sexism explains why some women bail out of engineering or mathematics, but a plausible explanation for the low number of women in this narrow definition of STEM could be that, generally speaking, women prefer working with people rather than things. And the simple fact is that, assuming overall parity, it's statistically impossible for women to be a majority in one broad field without being a minority in another. So what does that translate to into the workplace? Assuming at this point, what I'm describing seems to suggest that we don't have a gender representation issue in STEM. We just have less women within the narrow definition of STEM, namely in engineering and mathematics and computer sciences. I think that's reflected based on the, I guess it's kind of representative of the male-female ratios of speakers and attendees at LRVS, right? So the fact is, we as a society have not come into agreement of what our vision of diversity and inclusion mean. For example, advocates of equality agenda want to see the most talented and passionate individuals joining their desired field of profession, regardless of their, life circumstances or unalterable characteristics such as their sex and race. In this case, diversity is having a variety of individuals, which implies, racial, ethnic, gender equality, diversity, but also political and religious diversity, right? And in this case, inclusion involves welcoming a broad range of individuals to consider pursuing male-dominated STEM fields such as computer sciences as a career. The equality agenda then is about encouragement and removal of artificial barriers. And I know what I'm saying may it is a little bit controversial, but there is an equity agenda that among activists that has a specific meaning of working to dismantle existing power structure as a way to redress privilege. And in this case, the proponents are more concerned with outcomes not necessarily demanding equal outcomes, but instead using unequal outcome as evidence that there's more work to be done. Inclusion in this case is about culture, which I guess it sounds Orwellian, but it demands the exclusion of ideas and opinions. And we see this in, I guess, in the Western society for sure right now. It's become sort of this tribal narrative, right? So unless and until we reach, like perfect gender parity, they will continue to argue for more diversity programs for women. So I think personally, and I guess that's what I'm here for today, is to effect change. We need to have a deeper conversation about the barriers responsible for the lack of representation of women and minorities in STEM. And really, the issue is complex. We already established earlier that the capabilities between the genders not the issues. I'm aware I'm using gender and sex interchangeably here, bear with me. But there's enough studies to support that, generally speaking, men and women do have different interests that lead to different career paths. So how little girls and boys are raised also affect how men and women perceive failures and successes. Generally speaking, lack of confidence is a particular problem for women. Like the stereotype threat or imposter syndrome should be discussed more openly because women disproportionately suffer from these problems. Uh, and then there is the obvious ones too, right? Men and women have different life priorities. The concern for family, work-life balance, even good night's sleep sometimes come at the cost of, uh, you know, sorry, I want to turn this on. Have a good night's sleep, sometimes come at the cost of pursuits and success in professions. So while men have the advantage of creating culture that matches their values and interests because of their earlier participation in STEM field and even the workforce as a whole, it's a dangerous narrative to say the gender gap is mostly the fault of men and patriarchal organization they have built to serve their interests. Certainly, there are bad actors and companies where the culture is broken, but the vast majority of women working at companies that make significant um, efforts to provide a supportive work experience. Um, so, in conclusion, the conversation about gender diversity in STEM field is complicated. I don't expect you agree everything I've brought up, but I think we can all agree that the actual definition and our perception of what STEM stands for warrant a more refined description. And regardless of your views on how to address the gender gaps in some of the male-dominated fields, and I know I'm speaking about this from a very Western perspective because the discrimination against women is very real in other parts of the world. We can see in real time what's going on right now with the protests in Iran, for example, right? So, however, precisely because the issue is complicated, I think we as a society or community need to be aware of the languages surrounding the gender gap. To skip the positive about messages about women succeeding in STEM and focus on the negative stories about men behaving badly in these fields would only do more harm than good. Women would find themselves um, wondering if they should resent men. Um, uh, Women would find themselves wondering if they should resent men, and men will feel guilty for essentially sins committed by other men. And then women are not going to find this particular message appealing, and men will find themselves feeling even more awkward around women than they would be otherwise. Um, so our community must face the difficult truth that we aren't necessarily going to progress in attracting women into the engineering, mathematics, and computer sciences anytime soon. Women can build things and code, but often maybe they don't want to. Um, we may never reach gender parity. However, I think it's time for everyone to be honest and that having that equal 50-50 representation in these fields may never happen. But accepting that idea doesn't mean that women should feel unwelcome for those who decide and choose to enter these fields. Recognizing that women will be in the minority should make organization even more appreciative of the women who choose to join them. And it's my belief that the effort should be diverted on how to retain these talents so that they can succeed and thrive in their chosen field. And perhaps there will be more women in these fields. We also make a greater effort to encourage men to participate in predominantly female fields of professions. And that's it for my presentation.
All right. I think
We know.
you did a great job, Jen. I mean, there are so many concepts that you spoke about that I never even thought about.
I'm
And we
scratching the
have,
surface.
yeah,
Like
yeah, I know, right?
once I
We need
talk
an
to you,
entire day for this.
yeah, it's like a book.
Like,
But I'm aware of
good
time.
idea there.
Yeah.
So we have something from Jacob Simmons. He is saying, what are your thoughts on this concept in Western countries versus countries that generally have low diversity? Do you think that a push for female equality correlates with racial and ideological diversity in society? Jacob, that's a big one.
It
So
is. I wish I
I'm
could see
dropping it on the
the answer.
screen for you.
Yeah. I was like, that's a long question.
It
Let me
is.
let
But
me
it's
see.
all it I
Do
understand
I
what Jacob is getting at here.
okay. Do I need to click end show or
Yes.
stop sharing?
Yes, stop
Right.
sharing.
There we go. What are your thoughts
Jacob,
on
you're good. Don't worry.
uh, versus countries that generally have low diversity? Well,
Mm,
first of all, like that's kind of what I was arguing, right? Like even within the Western countries that have diversity as they have touted, even in that sense that I'm challenging that. Is it really diversity, or are you just like a fitting a quota for the sake of fitting a quota, but not really getting to the root of the problem, right? Because what I'm arguing here is that like there is an inherent bias. Like there's enough studies to show that women generally prefer, like given the same capabilities, even though they excel at math, because the bright girls, little girls who are great at mathematics and sciences, they generally are also good at language skills. And so they choose to pursue, like a different field, even though they have the technical capability to do it, right? So, like it's not, I think it's too narrow to say like we just need to boost numbers for the sake of boosting numbers, and not looking at what really the needs of, like, the different sexes are looking for, to fit their respective life and aspirations and whatnot. um, and I mean that opens a whole can of worms in itself, because now we're not just looking at like, okay, education programs, right? Like we're talking about parenting, how you raise children. We're talking about like workplace diversity, not just like, okay, we need to hire x amount of women, or we need to promote x amount of women just because to tick a box and say this is a quota we need to like fulfill. But that what for these women who chose to enter these fields, what are their goals and aspirations, right? Like there should be greater alignment to what people actually want to pursue. So I feel like I went a big circle. But do you think that a push for female equality correlates with the racial and okay, well,
yeah.
that's the touchy one. But I think similarly there is that kind of like it applies to other like minority groups as well, right? Like me being a visible minority, sometimes I don't know if I got the job because I'm female, or that I'm ethnically Chinese or whatever, right? But like instead of focusing on what makes me different, perhaps we should also like, and I think that's a danger, opening another topic too, the danger of Western societies in this kind of diversity and inclusion is that you know um, we are weakening our, if I were to be daring enough to say, we're weakening our competitiveness globally, right? If we're only aiming at fulfilling a quota, then we're not selecting candidates based on meritocracy, what their actual capabilities are, right? And it's a fine line because obviously, like there needs to be a culture that allows both women and men to feel like the sky's the limit. They can pursue whatever
Yeah.
opportunities they choose to, and you know, then it's level playing field. That's my belief anyway. Very long answer. Sorry.
That's it was a long question, so we're okay with that, Jen. We are out of time, directly out of time. I know it's
Okay.
how did 30 minutes fly so fast, right?
Yes.
Um, we are going into our closing sessions in a bit, so meet us there and find out who won the game. I know a lot of
Okay.
people are on that game challenge. So, Jacob, thanks for the question. He says it
Okay.
makes sense. Yes, yes, definitely. So, look out
Yeah.
for the recording of this. We will have recordings up by next week. And,
Mhm.
Jen, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Anya.
All
Thank you.
right.
All right. Bye.
Bye.